All right, everybody, welcome to PTP, LinkedIn Live Lunch and Learn. Today we're talking about data orchestration, steps to success, and our guest today is Scott Shirey. Scott, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to see you.
Okay, these sessions are only going to be 15 minutes, some quick questions, and I don't want to chew up a bunch of the time, but I have to tell you, I start them off with a dad joke. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm born ready.
All right, let's do this. All right, Scott, why are toilets so good at poker?
I don't know. You got me stumped.
Because they always get a flush.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry. I just can't resist these. I mean, literally, you and I find them funny. If nobody else does, it's all right. Who matters? All right, Scott, let's get to our topic today of data orchestration steps to success. Now, data orchestration is common in most, if not all, industries today. What are some of the unique challenges that life science organizations face in their data orchestration initiatives?
So, life science organizations, I think, have a number of challenges, but in other industries, they don't have a ton of instruments or a ton of different data types, or for example, if you have imaging data coming in, or you have protein specific data, or genomics instruments like sequencers, right? So, I think that the different sources and the purpose of those instruments and also how that data is extracted from the instruments into further analysis. So, really, where this becomes a challenge for life science organizations is that they need to take all this different type of data and make sure they know the purpose of the data, make sure they know that that data is going to the appropriate pipeline. If it's imaging data, for say, for example, it's actually about structural information on what you're looking at. So a big thing right now is like structural genomics and things like that, where or sorry, spatial transcriptomics and spatial genomics, and you want to evaluate the structure and also how your treatment is applying to that. So that creates a number of problems when it goes from the wet lab through the instruments into the cloud where your data science teams are interpreting it. And I think that complexity is what makes it a lot different in the life sciences industry.
Scott, would you say that there's so much data, but you have to understand your data, understand the structure of your data, understand what you're looking to accomplish with your data, and then bring it all together?
Exactly. And I think where this becomes a bigger problem is you might have, say, a proteomics team or a genomics team producing information, and that data might actually be siloed from each other in the past because you might be focused on just that one focus area. But now there's a lot of research coming out where people are trying to map this different information in latent space. So now you're saying, okay, well, all this used to be separate, and we need to consolidate this to get the bigger picture. And that's creating a lot of challenges for different organizations.
Scott, why is it so difficult for even like life science organizations to break down this existing data and the silos to just streamline the process? And really, what would it take to actually get it started?
Yeah. So when it comes to new organizations, right? So right now, I mean, everybody in the industry is aware that, between VC funding being difficult to, ascertain or to prove out or validate your research to get to that next level of funding, people are getting started and they just want to get information from the instruments, validate that research, and try to get to that next level of funding. So they're often aware when we end up working with them that, hey, we put all this together with, bubble gum and duct tape, and it's not exactly what we should have done. But on the flip side, you have the whole other, component of older biotechs or, more established ones where they've been producing data for a long time. But now we're shifting from, biotech towards tech bio. So the world's becoming, so data hungry and, data's king. So with the older organizations, we often find that it's like the person who doesn't want to go to the doctor because they don't want to hear it from the doctor that they, should be eating better, doing the different things there. So with these older organizations, it's, a giant pill to swallow. Oh, there's your dad joke, by the way. But as far as it goes, the like when you're looking at all that, it's just a giant pill to swallow as far as where do we get started. So we have a client right now where they have multiple ELNs. They have like I think at least 1,000 instruments, and they're saying, "Hey, our people can't really find anything, and they can't, access this data, and we understand that we're in this pickle." And unfortunately, there's no, one step solution to this. But what you can do is say, okay, we're going to start by at least making data come to one area. So if you have teams like who like Databricks or Python or something like that, you can say, all right, let's move all this data into S3 where people can access the data. So we don't have to change the way that you're running your day-to-day workflows, or if you're, using Databricks or you are using Python. But then from there, it becomes really I guess, a stepwise approach where first you're making it findable and accessible, but then you need to build out different orchestration for specific workflows. Uh, say AI machine learning, where you're looking for specific answers from specific data types. And that process might be a lot more granular than just making everything in findable accessible from the start.
Scott, you mentioned S3. Let's talk about AWS a little bit. How and where does AWS come into play around life sciences and these workflows?
Yeah. So AWS, similar to how PTP operates, it's really you don't do the science, but you facilitate the science. So there's a number of ways where AWS fits into this picture. So if you have, thousands of instruments in your lab, right? You can set it up so you have a storage gateway where it's automatically exfiltrating the data from your instruments into your S3 bucket into AWS. There's different ways through, say you're using like benchling or different ELNs where you want to move that data from your ELN. It has, some of the scientific context or, capture the metadata. And then you can actually put that into AWS from there. Additionally, as you're moving through this process, Amazon Healthomics, for example, has Nextflow natively, but then you can also have Nextflow separate from Healthomics where it's running on EC2 instances. So you can auto scale that, and it doesn't matter, right? I guess they support most research workflows. So if you're having like your, proteomics pipeline or your genomics pipeline or, different pipelines that you're running, you can actually run them in parallel using, say, AWS Batch. And then from there, with like Amazon Health Lake, I mean, there's a number of ways that AWS kind of fills the gaps in the journey, and then it'll allow you to scale that science, and it also provides the means through the cloud, right? Of okay, say that you're in Philly, right? So the lab in Philly produced all of the data, but then you need your bioinformatics team out in Boston to, start interacting with the data. So now that you had a storage gateway on site, it moved it to the cloud. Now you're collaborating with those other satellite locations that you're working with. So there's numerous ways where AWS fits into your life science data orchestration journey.
Scott, before you were talking about obviously the life sciences, and let's talk about an older company, right? I've got all this data, all this stuff to do, and it's a hard pill to swallow. And by the way, I loved your dad joke. As a life science organization, I have all this data, but I don't want to manage it. I don't want to organize it. I don't want to deal with it. In fact, I just want to do my job and work on the stuff that I want to do. How can I leverage PTP and AWS in order to streamline this process and get started?
Yeah, so this is where I think it becomes challenging for certain organizations in general is, for example, recently we had a client ask, "Hey, can you turn this contract from, like a more services driven contract to just a solution?" And I think that right there is not quite right. Like as far as it goes, every single environment has been built differently, and the tools that you're going to need to support that are going to be different. So, for example, if you're having trouble getting data from benchling into these workflows, that will be a separate thing. And I know that there's like an event log and different things you can do there to facilitate that process to get it to, the data warehouse you're going to use for like AI and machine learning applications. but every single organization is different. And as soon as you add in, okay, you have multiple ELNs, okay, these instruments are at this location, these are at another location, and you don't just pile them into AWS. So I think where PTP falls into it is we are an AWS partner, but from there, it doesn't matter what other third party tools you might be using to help put that data together. So, for example, we're a Quilt partner, and Quilt adds, a mesh on top of your S3 buckets. And the different Quilt packages, I like how Simon puts it, but he calls it data archaeology. So even if you have old data that comes in, and now suddenly you can start interacting with that data, now you can start to learn from it and start building out your data orchestration practice to support all this stuff, going on right now with like, Gen AI and LLMs and all that stuff, right? That's all built on solid data orchestration methods.
Scott, let's talk about Gen AI a little bit. How about AI ML? How does data orchestration actually process support this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's the hottest topic in the industry right now, as far as it goes, because data orchestration is underlying every single AI machine learning model. So you can't really, everybody's excited to get started on AI ML, but then the first thing that they realize is, okay, well, we want to pull all these files in. But then as soon as you start looking at models, right? For example, like Anthropic and Claude 3, you know, those models will only accept certain data types. So we have had clients where they say, hey, look, we have, PDFs and some other documents, but can we, slide in like PowerPoint slides and things like that to start learning from this summarized data? And you're saying, well, no, we'd actually have to convert those to other documents and file types to even start that machine learning process. So data orchestration really underlies everything. And I also think that it's kind of funny with the lab of the future, right? It's really the lab of the now, because what you're doing right now in your data orchestration practices open the doors to all the models. But if your data orchestration is not there, well, then you're looking and you're scratching your head saying, well, where can we start now? And that's the pill to swallow, right? So
Scott, talk to us a little bit more about the steps to success with data orchestration of getting started, and that's really the hardest problem for companies that already exist and have all this data relevant. While startups and companies that are already kind of like just getting off the ground, they've got a plan, they have an understanding on what they want to do it, but as an existing company, I need to be successful in order to get my data to the right place at the right time at the right speed. What are some other ways that I could be successful?
yeah, so I think just getting started, I guess, where you have to look at it where each individual process that you have implemented, right, is going to be different for different research types. So if your first issue is okay, well, people can't find the data, they can't access the data, they can't work with it and get it into their existing workflow, that is one set of problems. And you can, start working around that. You can start, moving that data, replicating it to S3, and then use like say intelligent tiering to archive the data that is like you're probably not going to access very much. But then from there, it really depends on each group, and I think that your business plan in each group, right, where what are you really trying to achieve with the data? So if it's kind of say you have a group who's doing like lead identification, or they're trying to identify new drug targets, right? You can take a subset of data and say, I'm going to do unsupervised learning on this. But then there's other areas where you could say, okay, we love this data. This is excellent. We've combed over it heavily, and maybe you have, like a center of AI excellence in place where you can say, hey, we need to be logging the different features, or weighing the different features to support this model that we're trying to build here, because we're looking for these specific answers. Those are different sects in your data orchestration process that are different from the overall, let's just find the data.
Well, Scott, I got to wrap
So
things up, and this has been an awesome conversation around data orchestration and steps to success. Scott, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, John.
Well, everybody, this has been PTP's LinkedIn Live Lunch and Learn with Scott Shirey for data orchestration, steps to success. I was your host, John Meyer. Don't forget to follow PTP on LinkedIn. Go to PTP. You'll find all their information on their website. And as always, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because we're out as soon as I click this end stream and then end stream again because we're out.